Good morning. Welcome to Mosaic. Again, we're moving our way through our series in Genesis. We've talked about it in the past. We're just going to cover the first 11 chapters. And before I launched into this morning, listening to all the things I've been listening to, something kind of came to mind. I thought I want to kind of double back and say something. I showed you this last week. I think this one and the next quote I'll show you really do encapsulate why people believe in evolution. Now, sometimes there's trickery where they have been convinced that, but you can trick people. It's like if you're conning someone, you play on their greed and they think they're kind of getting away with something and then they go along with it. And then it's hard for them to complain later because they kind of thought they were doing something a little shady. That's the classic, con. These people know what they believe isn't true, but this is why they believe it. They're willing to be conned into thinking that evolution is true because of what this is talking about here. This was said by George Wald. He says, I don't want to believe in God. That's actually the heart of it. I don't want to, because then I will be accountable, and I don't want to be accountable. It says, therefore, I choose to believe in that which I know is scientifically impossible. And that really is, the thing I want you to take away is don't ever shrink back when you want to admit that you believe in creation or that you reject evolution. Don't feel like you're you're checking your intelligence at the door and all the insults that might come your way. Don't fall for that. The reason this has been so vehemently attacked, it is the foundational truth, this creation thing that we're looking at, but it is, the reason it's so vehemently attacked is because it's truth. Lies don't like truth. And they can't compete with truth, so they just try to crush it with things like ridicule and criticism and shame and all these things. So don't let that happen to you. What you believe is very consistent with logic. I was listening to an interview last night and this morning. Trying to remember the name of what he talks about. It's finely tuned principle, and all the different ways that the earth and our ability to inhabit the planet are finely tuned. I had heard this years ago, and there was 8 ways, and then it was 12 ways, and then there was 47 ways. And they just keep finding more ways that things are absolutely finely tuned. And it is the strongest argument against evolution. Evolutionists at times will admit that, well, yeah, the finely tuned thing, that's a tough one. So they come up with really kind of bizarre at times ways of combating that. But don't ever lose track of this is at the heart of it, okay? He believes, therefore, what is scientifically impossible, spontaneous generation leading to evolution. And then this kind of goes beyond that a little bit further. This is Sir Julian Huxley, one of the world's leading evolutionists of his day, the head of UNESCO, a descendant of Thomas Huxley, which they referred to as Darwin's bulldog. So Darwin postulated his theory, but Huxley really was the one out cramming it down the throats of everyone. He was the fighter for it. He said on a talk show, I suppose the reason we leaped at the origin of species was because the idea of God interfered with our sexual mores. I want to do that, and he said no, so I will believe the scientifically impossible. But, I mean, you just strip it all back, there's honest, that's what's going on. So don't lose sight of that. That's what we're going to talk about this morning is very reasonable to believe. So this is where we were at last week. I'm just going to read through it so we kind of get a running start into where we're at, and we'll just cover what happened in the first 3 days here real quickly. It says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning the first day. And God said, "Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." And God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. And it was so. And God called the expanse heaven, and there was evening and there was morning the second day. So we learned last time that what did God create on the first day? Well, he had to first start by creating time, because he exists outside of time. So he had to create time to place his creation into. He created space and matter. We talked about that extensively the last time. We are going to continue to try to get these up on YouTube, so if you miss a week, you can go back. He created light on the first day. He created the concept of evening, and morning. And I say here, probably the angelic realm. Don't really know when they got brought into being. I don't think it was before time and space and matter, because I don't think they would have existed prior to that. I don't think they were around before the beginning. You can find a verse and prove me wrong if you'd like, but that's where I'm standing in the meantime. What did God create on the second day? He gave structure to the water. We talked about that. It was without form and void, so that was all there, but it didn't really have the shape that we think of now. He separated the water into two sections. This created a spherical ball of water that we think of now like the earth, and the skies above the water, and another layer of water above the skies. I was talking, I think, Mark, before class, and several have said, "Man, this seems really strange." And I agree that it seems strange. There's kind of two views on that. I didn't talk about both of them last week. This outer layer of water is above the heavens. The idea of three heavens doesn't come up until the New Testament. We think of that, or at least that I'm not aware of. It's in the Old Testament. The heavens would be where birds are. Then there's space. That would be the second heaven where the moon is. And then the third heaven would be where God is. A completely separate space from what we think of as space. So some would say that this second layer of water is on the outside of the universe. And if we ever get there far enough, we'll find this wall of water. Others would say, no, it's referring to above the atmosphere of the first heaven. That's where I'm at. That's what I think, and that's what I've kind of expressed to you guys. It could be that I thought about how to try to create something like this, but I'm not a video guy. But like you're sitting in a meadow and then you start backing out, and you can see the globe distance, and then past the moon and past Pluto and out of the Milky Way, and then out past some other galaxies, and then bloop, out onto a bright sunny meadow, and there stands God holding a globe looking at it or something. I don't know that that's accurate, but so it could be something like that, and this outer layer of water is kind of the outer sphere. Don't think so, but we're not really given enough detail there to be dogmatic is the point. What did he do on the third day? He named the remaining water, the lower water, seas. He created dry land, which he called earth, and then created all vegetation and its ability to reproduce itself. So that's where we got through last time with day 3. So we'll start now with day 4, and what did he create on day 4? And so we'll start looking at that. I think we skipped over something in our text, but that's all right. All right, and God said, "Let there be light in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night. And let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth." And it was so. And God made the 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good, and there was evening and there was morning, the fourth day. So that's the entirety of the passage. So now we'll kind of walk our way through this a little at a time. So what reason is given for making the sun and the moon? You might say, well, to give us light, and that's true. He says it's to light the earth, but it's also, he had already created light on day 2. All right, no, I can't remember. Day 1 or day 2? Day 1, yeah, sorry. But he already had done that. This he then puts in place to fulfill that source of light from there going forward. So, he says, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night. So this word heavens here, it's the same Hebrew word. I actually went and kind of figured out, is this separation thing? Is it a different word? It's not. I got excited for a moment because it said heaven and heavens. I thought, oh, maybe there's something there, but it's not. I went and found heavens used for where birds are as well. So go ahead.
The slide before, I'm not a scientist, but isn't part of our time built around the sun and the moon? Isn't that how we judge time?
Yep.
So until there was a sun and the moon,
how did we have evening and morning?
Or time?
Well,
how do we measure it, I guess?
Right. I think time existed. We use them as markers of time, but they don't create the time.
Okay.
You see what I mean? If the sun wasn't there and the earth revolved, it would get back to the same place 24 hours later. We just wouldn't realize it because it would be dark. Do you know what I mean? So they're not the creation of it, they're the indicator of it. Go ahead.
And plants will not grow without the sun.
Right.
That's probably
one of the reasons I highlight the fact that he created light before he created the sun and the moon and the stars is this whole idea of we're looking at a star at night that's 50 million light years away, but we can see it, and we're only been here 6,000 years. The light shouldn't be here yet. And I just want to kind of set that aside for you by saying he created the light before he created the entities. So that's not a big deal. If he wants to create a star 50 million light years away so that Adam can see it, of course he'll create the light from here to there so that he can see it. He's not going to have him wait 50 million years to see it. That would kind of defeat the purpose of creating stars, right? So this idea that the light comes from the sun, obviously, right? We feel the heat off of it. We see the light. I'm not arguing that that's not the case. What I'm saying is, don't let the distance of something create a problem for you. That's not a problem. It's an artificial problem. I was explaining to my sister-in-law, I may have mentioned this last week, if you took a doctor back in time and he did a physical on Adam on day 8, he would have never said he was 2 days old. He would have said he's 25 or 30 probably, right? He created adults, so we've settled the chicken and the egg argument, right? Obviously the chicken came first on day 5, and then the eggs came later, right? So anytime somebody asks that, just answer it for them and they'll stop having to worry about it. All right. So he separates the day and the night. And let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. So to your point earlier, one of the reasons he gives us the sun and the moon is for light, and the other is so that we'll have them as a point of reference for days and years. And when we make one travel around the sun, that's a year. When we revolve once, that's a day. So he created everything the way it is so that we could use them as signs and seasons. Where the sun is at and the stars. I'm a garden guy, so I'm always thinking about shadows. And at different times of year, I have a greenhouse, so I'm thinking, okay, I don't want this too high because it'll block the sun from that side of the greenhouse because it's going to come here, but right now it's coming from here and everything's getting sun. So I have to put shade stuff up to keep, because the sun keeps moving. Well, I know where it's going to be next summer because that's where it's always at next summer. I know where it'll be this winter because it's always at. So even that, it tells us signs of seasons. We can tell, right? So that's part of why he gave them to us. But he also did it so that they would give light to the, let them be light in the expanse of the heaven and give light upon the earth. We don't think a lot about that now because we have light switches, right? But it used to be that people went to bed when it got dark for the most part because they didn't have electricity. But yet you go outside at night and the moon actually gives you a fair amount of light. I mean, you can really see. It's not pitch black out there. I mean, there is when there's no moon, but my point is they really do give light to the earth. Both of them do, not just the sun. And I do understand that the sun is reflecting off the moon, so unless somebody in the comment section of YouTube decides to get snarky, I'm aware of that, so leave me alone. All right, to separate the day from the night, that's part of why he created them. He gives us that as an actual, it's a quote. Let them be for signs and for seasons, and for days and for years, and to give light upon the earth. That's the purpose that's given to us as to why he created the heavens or the sun and the moon. And God said, and it was so. I want to highlight that each time. There's not this long process. Every one of these, and God said, he spoke and it occurred. It was so. There's not we'll see that come up several times this morning. I just kind of like to draw attention to it. So he states what he's going to do, or that he does, and then he kind of goes back through that. And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, the sun, and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. So I have a question on there for you, and that is, why did God make the stars? He tells us why he made the sun and the moon. It's the seasons, it's time, reference, all of that. It's light. We don't really get light from stars. You can kind of tell what season based on, the star patterns and things. But why did he make stars? Just think about that for a moment.
We use the North Star for guidance.
Direction, yeah, that could be one thing.
Just for,
It's pretty.
yeah.
We know that he's a God who loves beauty. He creates incredible, beautiful things that we never see. Whole mountainside of flowers that spring up and are beautiful, and he's the only one that ever sees them, and they die and go away, and no one was ever there, right? So he does some things just because he loves beauty, and they are beautiful. Go ahead.
So we look at the Big Dipper. It shows order in what looks like nothing.
Yeah. He likes to show his,
Creation.
what I'm trying to think of is order. Yeah,
Structure, order.
structure. Yeah, that's the word I was looking for.
He may have done it just to make man in our day and age realize how small we are. It's funny how, you think that's the stars.
Yeah.
Our family did a trip to Hawaii a few years ago, and if you ever get to go there, you gotta go to the Big Island, Mauna Kea, where all the observatories are at. It's the darkest place on earth, and the darkest night sky. And I live in Michigan, northern Michigan, you can see a lot of stars, but when we went to Hawaii, it looked like the entire sky was white with stars. It's just incredible. But we've sent telescopes into outer space, and every time we can see farther,
Yeah.
we see more and more and more.
Yeah.
And it's just like we think we keep knowing what the edge of the universe is, but it just keeps
Yeah.
going.
Yeah. I'm not giving Darwin a pass, right? His heart was wicked in the desire to dethrone God, but there's a little bit of an excuse when all you've got is a piece of beveled glass to see the single cell blob that looks like a blob. And he can only see, 1,000,000 stars or whatever. We don't have that excuse now, right? We've gone so far down the rabbit hole this way, we can't find the depth of complexity. And as far as we can go the other way, it just melts the brain to try to find the edges of it. I would tell you this is part of why he does it. This is from Psalm 19:1. The heavens declare the glory of God.
Amen.
the further we look, the more glory he gets. This is true in David's day. It's truer now. If we're here 50 years from now, it will be truer then. He just keeps looking more and more and more incredibly awesome. You know what I'm saying? To speak stars is one thing, but to speak a billion galaxies in a breath is just, it's not like it took more energy. It's just phenomenal. So I wanted to show you this. This is a typical spiral galaxy that looks similar to our Milky Way. That's not a sun in the middle. All those little dots are suns or stars. There would be a billion stars in that galaxy. The amount of space between these things is just staggering, okay? It's 55 million light years across and about 60 million light years away. And that's kind of just, you know, again, light years, 93 million miles a second times 60 seconds times 60 minutes times 24 hours times, you know.
It's a long
It's
way.
just, yeah. How far can you travel? Well, it'd take too many zeros to put it in miles, so they just put light years. So there's your trillion miles or whatever it is. And it's 55,000 of those. And then distance from here to there is 60 million. This is one. Now let me show you. Those are all galaxies, not stars. That's when you pinprick the night sky, and it's just a little pinprick. It's how big it is. And you zoom all the way in, and you're stretching the magnification as far as you possibly can. That's what they find. Endless galaxies in every pinprick of the sky. And the stars also is the way God spoke that. And the stars.
But the space station reminds me, we set that up and it goes around and you can look
Yep.
up and see it at certain times and
Yep.
look, wow, that's a big star. Oh, it's moving.
Yeah.
You know, well, that's man's interjection into space. We haven't
Yeah.
got out of our
Yeah.
our atmosphere practically with that, you know.
Yeah.
So, such
And
a
we can
small
send
thing.
probes out, but I mean, like to these different planets. I was watching a video this week where somebody sent something to some, I don't remember which planet. It's 400 degrees Celsius on the surface, and it lasted for an hour before it melted or whatever. And again, that planet is not finely tuned for life, right? One of the reasons I wanted to talk about this, though, is, and this, by the way, is the answer to that question in part. Creation's complexity is only equaled by its vastness and only surpassed by the awesome God that created it. I said that in week 1, but I want you to keep expanding that in your brain this way and this way to really grasp what we're saying there. And this would be the reason I would say, why did God make stars? For the same reason he made things so extraordinarily complex. He did it to show us the infinite power, wisdom, and creativity that he has. It's a revelation about who he is really what it's there for. It's to make us go, oh my word. Yeah. Let me do this real quick, because I'm going to forget. I had forgotten and remembered, and I don't want to forget it again. About within the last month, there was a congressional hearing about alien stuff. Okay.
UFOs and all that.
Yeah.
right?
Now, I know, and I kind of think this way, maybe that was a distraction or something. Okay, that's possible. But they are going to bring out the fact that there are aliens and here's the craft. And I'm absolutely convinced they're going to do that. But they're not aliens, is my theory. I think they're just demonic. It's part of the great deception at the end. They are doing things that aren't physically possible because they're not physical in the way that you and I would be physical. They're other dimensional. They are able to go, 10G this way and make a right angle turn. That's not technology. That's not even of this realm, I don't think. And so the point is, I think that will be part of that great distraction. So don't be bothered by that. The reason I'm bringing it up is when people look at this, so often you'll hear them say, it's so big, surely there are other life, right? I showed you the video once where they literally say one of the reasons we're out looking for other life on other places is because it will help us understand our origins. No, it wouldn't, right? Only if you say, well, we know it's not this, so what else can we? It doesn't mean there has to be something there. He didn't make it for that reason. Jesus didn't need to go and die 2 or 3 times throughout the universe. He did that once. Could he have done it? Yeah, there's nothing to say that that's impossible. I'm just saying there's no reason for it. The reason he's done this is to show us his awesomeness. He doesn't need another reason, is my point. So don't get bogged down in the stuff that will be probably coming relatively soon. Okay, go ahead.
Project that thought, that's just what's in my mind. Why did he make the stars? To show us that it's not possible for those stars to be there without something creating them.
Yeah.
That's just like with evolution, I always go back to, but where did the blob come from?
Yeah. So if there's this tiny
It's the
little
ultimate
whatever and it explodes in the Great Bang, well, where did it come from, right? And they would say, well, but where did God come from? Well, a self-existent, omniscient creator definitionally wouldn't necessarily need a creator, right? But matter does. That isn't true when you talk about helium and carbon. You know what I mean? Those things obviously had to have a beginning. They're not self-existent. But God definitionally could be self-existent. So, all right, let's keep moving. And God set the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And he saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning, the 4th day. So what did he create on the 4th day? The sun, the moon, and all of the stars, which would be everything in the universe. He also established that we would use the sun to determine days and years. Now, here's an interesting kind of thing to think about. In the Jewish calendar, they would have used the moon to help determine months, right? What in creation, why do we have 7-day weeks? What stellar body would have established that? Universally, worldwide, there's 7-day weeks. Now, we all have the same 24-hour days because the sun, the moon, or the earth revolves, right? We have the same year because the sun, moon, or the earth goes around the sun. How do we establish a 7-day week universally around the globe?
Rotation of the earth. No?
It travels from here to here in 7 days, but why a 7-day week? There's no stellar body that does that.
The rotation would just do the 24-hour day, but not 7 days.
So what we see is you can identify days, you can identify years, you could have identified months at one time. We've kind of come up with a different strategy for that now. There is literally nothing that establishes a 7-day pattern. Except for,
The number 7.
no, except for the fact that God said, there's a week.
Yeah.
Rest on the seventh.
And
Rest on the 7th.
humanity throughout the entire earth ever since has.
And 7 is his perfect number, right?
Yeah, but I mean, he creates in 6 and rests on the 7th. And there's nothing else that creates a 7-day week. And it's a universally accepted truth that that's how long a week is. They don't have 10-day weeks somewhere else, you know what I mean?
Some country tried to
Metric calendar?
12-day week,
Oh, okay.
as I remember, and it was a total flop.
Yeah.
It just didn't work.
Yeah. I was thinking it might have been Soviet Union or one of those. I was thinking they called it the metric calendar, but it could have been 12. I just remember it was longer than 7. They tried it and it just completely bombed and they said, forget it, we're going back to 7. And I think it was people were getting sick a lot more because they were working like, 10 days and taking 3 days off or whatever. I mean, it was just this, it just doesn't work. God designed us to work 6 and rest on the 7th. And when we don't, we pay consequences for that in the long run. So, what did he create on the fifth day? Let's go there. Again, and God said, "Let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures." It's interesting that he has swarms. I want you to notice the difference between the way he talks about things of the sea and how he talks about things of the air. Just kind of pay attention to that. How are they different? I don't have a question on there for you. I just want you to kind of look at it. "And let the birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens." Obviously, birds don't go into outer space, so here's our heavens are that atmospheric area. Okay, so I'm going to ask you this question. Let me show it to you first. I put these in the wrong order. So God created the great sea creatures and the living creatures that move in the water. There's separation. So my question to you is, why does God tell us that he made the great sea creatures separately from the rest of the living things in the water?
They breathe air.
I don't think that's why, but it may be. I'll show you here what we're looking at. So God created the great sea creatures. Now, let me show you this in a couple different translations. And by the way, yesterday, I can always tell when it's going to be good because I have all kinds of technical difficulties. My computer died yesterday and my whole Bible software is not working and it's just crazy. But anyway, KJV says it this way. I'm just going to read verse 22. "And God created great whales and every living creature that moveth, which the water hath brought forth abundantly." So here it says whales. This is NASB. God created great sea monsters. And that just sounds weird, so no translation saying that now, because that just makes us look even weirder than we already are.
Weird to the world, not to
Yeah,
us.
but my point is, as you go and start looking, I think that's the best translation. It's this word here, sea monster, how they've pronounced. There's a word for great, and it's just like an adjective word, and then there's this sea monster. Sea monster is translated sea monster. It's translated dragon. It's translated jackal in some places. It's just meant to. It's something other than the things that we normally interact with. It's some great beast of some sort. It's just something very different. And so to say, and this word here, great dragon, same two words. I want you to see how it's used in Ezekiel. I think this kind of helps us answer this question. This is the beginning of chapter 21 in Ezekiel 29. I said 21, sorry. "In the 10th year, in the 10th month, the 12th day of the month, the word of the Lord came to Ezekiel. Son of man, set your face against Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and prophesy against him and against all Egypt. Speak and say, thus saith the Lord God." So here's what God says to him. "Behold, I am against you, Pharaoh, king of Egypt, the great dragon that lies in the midst of his streams, that says, my Nile is my own, I made it for myself." God is putting the words in the mouth of this great dragon that makes its home in the Nile, which they have great fear of. And they had kind of put upon him this godlike status where he made the Nile and it was his domain and he made it. Well, God is saying, you know that great sea dragon or that great dragon that lives in the Nile that you think is so awesome? That's kind of where he's going with that. Verse 4, "I will put hooks in your jaw." He's speaking to the dragon, or this sea monster, "and make the fish of your streams stick to your scales. I will draw you up out of the midst of your streams. Ginormous sea creature." grab it, lift it up out of the water. Nothing could lift this thing out of the water. And all the fish are stuck to it, is the imagery here. And I will cast you out into the wilderness, you and all the fish of your streams. Because they thought of these fish as like his servants or whatever of this great monster. You shall fall on the open field and be brought to, and not be brought together or gathered. And it's not going to be orderly. I'm just going to strewn you across the dry ground. To the beasts of the earth and to the birds of the heavens I will give you as food. Pharaoh, you know that sea monster that you guys worship in the Nile and all of his fish? I'm going to grab him out, flip him out on the land with all of his fish and feed him to the birds. That's what I think of your puny sea god, is what he's saying. Verse 6, and then all the inhabitants of Egypt shall know that I am the Lord. So why does God have this sea monster separated out? This is my guess, okay? And I did get this when I was listening to one of these messages, and that they drew this attention to it. So Mr. MacArthur, I think, is the one that I heard talking about this. Many ancient nations saw great sea monsters as gods. I remember Dagon is the Philistines' false god, and he was like half fish, half man. The point is, they knew of these enormous beasts in the sea that could destroy ships and different things, and so they were very afraid of them. They thought of them like gods. They were very powerful. God is declaring that he created the most terrifying beast that they were aware of. That's the point. He's drawing out, you know the fish and the octopus and all these different things that you guys go and collect and you eat. But that thing that you're terrified of, that you've declared to be like a god, I made that one too. That's the point he's making here back in Genesis. He's drawing it out as a separate thing. So God created the great sea monster, I think is a better way to render them, and every living creature that moves, with which the water swarm. And he did this according to their kind. It's just simply a reference to the fact that they are made in an orderly way, and they will reproduce in an orderly way. There are limits to how they would be able to change over time. Dogs, right? Every so often you get a brand new dog breed that never existed, because you breed this with this, and you do that 7 generations, and you keep breeding offspring and different offspring, and now you have, what's the new one? Labradoodle or something, you know what I mean? That didn't exist. It hadn't been around for that long or something. Maybe there's a different one that I'm thinking of. Foxy Lopsy. So yeah, we can take dogs and create other dogs, but you can't take dogs and make camels out of them. Do you know what I'm saying? These are things after their kind. There's a variation among a species, but there's not jumping from one to another. And that's kind of his point here when he keeps saying after their kind. And every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. This is interesting. Kind of watch this and you'll see it again later. And God blessed them. How does God bless the creatures, these living creatures? By the way, this is the first time he's created living creatures. So plants are alive in a sense, but they don't have a spirit. They don't have consciousness. I mean, they'll grow toward light, but you can't talk to them. I mean, you can. Your carbon dioxide might help them out, but it's not like you can have conversations. You can't with these animals either, but they are aware a little bit. They can pull back from pain, but this idea of blessing them. He says he's blessed them by saying, be fruitful and multiply. That is their blessing, is their ability to be fruitful and multiply. Now he did that with trees by giving them seed, but that's just seed falls to the ground and grows another plant, right? This is the first time this has come into being, this idea of procreation. Dealt with an Amish farm once. They were called Procreate Farms. I thought that was the coolest thing. I'm thinking, man, that's an awesome name. And they're kind of like looking at each other. And I'm like, what? And they're like, well, you helped us name it last year when you were here. I had forgotten about it, but they were saying we want to have some kind of name that describes what we do. We raise a lot of baby animals of different kinds around here, but we don't want to call it, Sex Farm or something like that. So we're trying, and they hadn't named their farm yet. Most of them were like Miller Farm or something. I said, well, you could use the biblical reference of procreate. They're like, that's awesome. So the next year I'm like, so what's the name of the business? And Procreate Farms, which I thought was funny. Shows how bad a memory I have too, but.
So Chris, he blessed the rabbits more than he blessed others.
Yeah. And fill the waters. So he tells them to swarm and to fill the waters and let the birds multiply on the earth. Obviously they can't do that when they're in the air, so they come down, they make nests, and they do that. The thing it's just interesting, I was watching a show the other day, one of these nature things, and it's this huge big trawler pulling a net, and just the amount of fish. I mean, they're just driving around the ocean scooping up fish by the tens of thousands probably. You can drag a net through the sky all day long and not catch too many birds, We'll see flocks periodically, but fish, wildlife, fish in the water, or all kinds of wildlife in the water, they seem to be so much more plentiful than other types of animals. They do kind of swarm the water. It's pretty amazing. Talks about, he cares for the sparrow, or he feeds the sparrow. There was a conversation in one of these messages. Certain kinds of fish, they all lay eggs, but they lay different kinds of different amounts. This one, it was some sort of cod, lays 9 million eggs.
Jeez. At one time?
I think we'll call it per season or something like that. Because the other one was like 500,000. I mean, it was dramatically smaller. Now here's part of why. Again, one of these nature shows. Here come these big birds coming down and swooping in and picking up the other bird's eggs, and they destroy a huge number of eggs. And so out of the 9 million fish eggs, you might get 100 fish or something, I don't know. My point is, he's not just producing fish, he's producing food, right?
Yeah.
These eggs are the food of all these other animals. He's taking care of not the sparrows in that case, but the other fish or other types of things that eat these eggs. And yet he creates so many of them in this species, they can still fill the earth, fill the oceans with.
I was thinking that wasn't your boat that was filled with fish, was it?
No. No.
You told them about your fishing experience.
Well, we're just starting to figure out how to do some fishing, but it's not going well, but that's right.
Where else do you get caviar?
Yeah, caviar, that's a good point, yeah. Speaking of that, let's, cows, think about this. If you have a dog and you roll the dog over, there's 7 or 8 or 6 or something number of nipples for the little puppies to nurse off of, right? And how many animals do they produce, or puppies, or whatever do they produce? Same thing with cats. 6, 7, 8, like 1 each. Same thing with pigs. Same thing with cats. Goats, my memory is, have 2, and they have 1 or maybe 2. Cows don't have 4 babies, but they have 4 udders. They produce way more milk than a baby calf can drink. Why? Because he made that for us to drink. Just like the
calf to get the milk started.
Yes, but the point is, it's like there's a lot of these things he's made with the intention ahead of time. I'm going to have you overproduce fish eggs. I'm going to have you overproduce milk because I have another purpose for that other than its original, normal, you would think of purpose. So it's just kind of an interesting thing. And there was evening and there was morning the 5th day. So what did he create on day 5? Every form of creature that lives in the water and all the birds of every kind. I think that's kind of a good way to summarize that. That's what he did. Now, you've got 2 sheets. I didn't know how far we'd get. We have some time, so we'll just start working our way through the next sheet. We may or may not complete it. I normally have 4 to 6 questions, and I ended up with 10 this time. But, so we'll just kind of work our way and see how far we get. And God said, so we start with another God speaking things into existence. Let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds. Same kind of thing we saw before. Livestock and creeping things and beasts of the earth according to their kind. And it was so. He then kind of goes back and restates this. I'll read it and then I'll highlight something. And God made the beasts of the earth according to their kind, and the livestock according to their kind, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. Notice there's 3 groups. Both times he mentions the same 3 groups. But if you were a theistic evolutionist, by the way, that reminds me, I said something completely in error last time. I was talking about an atheist evolutionist, and I referred to him as a theistic evolutionist. And I got a puzzled look and a question, I think it was from Gary. He was trying to figure out what I was saying. He couldn't figure it out because I was completely wrong. And I know the difference. I don't know why I said that. Anyway, so an atheistic evolutionist rejects God, and a theistic evolutionist blames God for evolution. So that's the difference. But theistic evolutionists might say, well, they did evolve, but they started with this, and then they evolved to this, and then they evolved to that. And they just kept getting bigger and better and more complex, right? That's kind of the theory of evolution. So God kind of sees them coming and shoots that down with this, because he says livestock, creeping things, beasts, and then he says beasts, livestock, and creeping things. He changes the order around. So you can't say they evolved from this to that to that. No, it's just 3 groups, all simultaneously. And he mixes up the order on the second rendering for no real reason, but it helps to shoot down things like theistic evolution. Again, why would people believe theistic evolution? Because they don't want to be foolish, because they don't want to be thought of as stupid. I mean, there's a lot of reasons I think people buy into that. We talked about them some last time or the time before. So we'll keep moving. And God saw that this creation of these land animals was good. So now he says this. Then God said, let us. So I want to highlight this for you to show the difference. And God said, let the earth bring forth. And back in the waters, and God said, let the waters swarm. So it's not that the waters did the creating, but there's this coming out of water or coming out of earth. There is that, let the earth bring forth. But then when it gets to man, it changes from this impersonal, let the earth bring, to let us. He gets personal now when it comes to man. That's the point I want you to see. And what he says is, let us make man in our image after our likeness. So very clearly plural usage here. This would be one of those first early indicators that there's going to be shown throughout the revelation of Scripture to be a trinity. There's more than one speaking. He's not talking to the angels at this point. He's saying, let us make man in our image. Now, that kind of leads to the question. Let me show you this. And let them have dominion. So I guess I've got that question later. So let's go here first. What does it mean for man to have dominion over the earth? That's one of the things we're going to look at. And then secondly is, why did God give dominion to man? So there's 2 different things. What does it mean and why did he do it? So I want to look at both of those. Because he then says, let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So he's giving dominion to man over all of his creation, really. It's the fish, so we're talking about everything in the sea, the birds, everything that's in the heavens, all the livestock, and over all the earth, the creative order. I mean, just everything in creation. There's a dominion being given here to man, all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So this is an all-inclusive way of saying it's everything. He's giving dominion over them to everything. So God created man in his own image. So my question on there then is, what does it mean by God created man in his own image? So what is that? What's that kind of referencing? In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. So it's specifically saying to be in the image of God is to be created male and female. So because I'm a male and Jesus is a male, that's not what he's referring to. Because females are also made in the image of God. Okay? The Holy Spirit doesn't have bodily form, and yet we're made in his image, because it's made in our image, not just the image of Jesus. So there's something more going on here than just you're a man that looks like the God-man Jesus. That's really not what he's describing there. So I'm just gonna give you my best stab at an answer, and I reserve the right to add to or whatever on this later, because we'll end up talking more about created in the image of God in weeks to come. It means that we are relational. That's a big thing. Animals are not relational in that way. They are really instinctive. They may cling to someone who provides for them. They may have an ability to understand that you're struggling with something and they want to come lay by you. That's really not the same thing as relational, though. Animals are not relational in the way that human beings are. So we're relational. We're self-aware. It's just, we have an ability to understand, think about very complex things and how we interact with those things. Totally different than animals do. We have the ability to communicate with each other in complex and orderly ways. Think of great works of, Shakespeare or computer code, or, you know what I mean? We have the ability to create things that are just extraordinarily complex, and we have the ability to communicate. I was going to try to find this gentleman, and I can't remember his name now, but he's studied human beings and their ability to do language, and his thinking is that it is so innately part of being human that it's almost like it's kind of hardwired in, because children pick up language way faster than should be possible. But it's like it's just pre-designed in that they have this innate ability to communicate. And his theory on that is so compelling, the evolutionists don't want to hang out with him because they think he's a creationist when you read his stuff. And he's no, I'm not one of them. I'm with you guys. But it's just this compelling argument to be made for it is part of just being human, this ability to communicate, which is really a kind of a fascinating thing. I think that's part of what it means to be in the image of God. We also reflect his attributes. And this, I think, comes into the male and female. I've talked about this before some of these attributes are justice. Everybody that sees an injustice gets angry by that. It's just hardwired into everybody. Now, you may disagree about what's injustice, right? You may see somebody stealing something from a Nike store and say, well, that serves them right, those greedy blah, 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 right? So who's your injustice? Nike. Somebody else standing there looking at it thinks, the guy just stole something, that's wrong. So both people saw an injustice, but their personal biases and stuff maybe shade which way they see the injustice, but no one saw that as good, is the point. Well, they may see it as good, but they also see it as a form of justice. So here's my point. Justice is tainted by sin in us, so we don't get that right, but it is a reflection of God's character. Love. That's a reflection of God's character. Creativity. We don't see, I mean, animals can make some pretty amazing like bird nests and stuff, but that's not really creative. They're kind of hardwired to weave the nest that way, and every bird of that kind makes the same nest. It's not like this one makes it out of some different material and this one over here says, no, you know what, I think I'm going to make mine this way. No, it's just hardwired in, it's instinctive. But you drive through neighborhoods and every house is a little unique because we like things different. We like creativity. That's a reflection of God's character. An ability to bring order out of chaos. Now some of you may live in some disorder, right? Or you may have your office as kind of a disaster. But it bothers you and you'd like to get it more orderly. I was at a training recently and I put there like, what are the 3 things you want to focus on? And I get more organized, you know. And I've got a friend of mine who was there and he looks at what I'm doing. He goes, oh my word, you're so much more organized than I am. And when they got up to talk about what people wrote, she goes, well, I think everybody wrote get more organized. That's just part of being human, is we want to bring order to the things that are chaotic. That's part of us reflecting that. And then this love of beauty. This is the part I've talked about before. I was in Ohio, we were doing a garden, and my sister-in-law, I'm helping her plant flowers. And I said something like, if you can't eat it, don't bother. You know, I mean, it's just, I just have no sense of why do we waste energy on things you can't eat, you know? Why? Because she's reflecting God's character and a love for beauty, right? I've talked about before, Brenda wants to buy flowers, and I talk about wasting hundreds of dollars for years on stuff that we can't eat, right? I say it tongue in cheek because I've figured out how stupid that is the point. I'm really insulting God. Look at all the energy you wasted, God, making all these incredibly beautiful things that I think are foolish. Well, no, I'm the foolish, right? She's reflecting his character by the love of beauty. So those are just some of the things, and my point is, men don't reflect all of God's character, and neither do women. But men and women reflect the image of God. So that's a kind of an amazing thing. Don't see the differences in a spouse or something as a negative. They're not. They can grate on you and all that. I get that, but they're good.
And you guys never grate on us.
No, I'm saying you grade on each other, right? That's the point. One wants to push forward with these amazing things, and the other is saying, no, wait a minute. You let either of those people do their own thing, and they're crippled. One never does anything, and the other one drives themselves off the edge of a cliff. So God links their wagons together so they're moving along at a steady and slow pace, you know, that kind of thing, which creates tension, but that's good. You get more done that way. All right. We are going to wrap up here. And God blessed them. These are man and woman. And how did he bless them? He told them to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Same thing we saw earlier with the blessing of being fruitful and multiplying. So when we come back together, we'll look through the rest of these. Let's see. Yeah, I've got a fair amount more to go. Tell you what, let's go 5 minutes and see how far we get. Maybe we'll finish. Because we're supposed to be done might as well not stop since we're pretty close actually at the end. And God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply. I showed you that earlier. Fill the earth and subdue it. That's what their command is. They're to be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it. And then he repeats what he said earlier. Before he made them, he said, let's make them and give them dominion. And now he comes back, and now he's talking to them directly, and he's saying, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. So now it's a direct command to Adam and Eve to do that. Behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of the earth, that every tree with seeds in its fruit you shall have for food. And he does the same for the animals. They're also allowed to eat all the plants. So there is no eating of meat at this point, because there's no death, because there's no sin. Sin hasn't entered. There is no killing of animals to eat them, because that can't happen until sin has occurred. There's no death yet. So they are vegetarian at this point. So what does it mean for God, or for man to have dominion over the earth? I asked that question earlier. Here would be my answer to that. It is for us to subdue it. That we're kind of told that when he tells them to have dominion, they're to fill it and subdue it. Another way of stating that is that, or to have control of it, or to kind of, again, bring the order out of chaos. It is for us to be good managers, stewards, you could say that different ways, of all the resources God made for us to use for our enjoyment and his glory. So if we use his resources for our enjoyment that are sinful, obviously that would be bad, think cocaine, for example, right? But on the flip side of that, you have, the cacao beans that you roast and do all these different things, and get the cane and you grind it out and make a sugar, and you mix them together and you cook it, and now you have chocolate, right? And then somebody said, hey, let's put that in the milk from the cow, and now you have chocolate milk. Hey, all right. So the point is, that is us being good stewards of all those different things. That is us getting an enjoyment, but it brings God glory that we've used all these various things that he's created and we brought them all together. That would be kind of a silly example, but an example. Why did God give dominion to man? Because we are made in his image, and having dominion is part of being an image bearer. It's what God has. He has dominion. He is the one that is in control. And as his being in his image, he's given us that responsibility here. And it was so. And God saw that everything that he made was not just good this time, but now it's very good. Why? Because it's not missing anything. It's complete. Just fish, not good. It's good, but not really good. It's just good. Birds, good. Beasts, good. But once you develop this canvas, he's got the world, he's got the sun, the moon, the stars, he's filled it with everything, and then he puts the key to his whole creation on it, man and woman, and says, now, be fruitful and rule this dominion that I've given you. Which they never did, by the way, and we'll talk about that in some weeks to come. And there was evening and there was morning the sixth day. So what did he create on sixth day? He made all the animals that live on the ground, and he made man in his image and declared him to be the caretaker of his creation. Now, we do have time. What did God create on the seventh day? I want you to catch this. This is kind of, I think it's a little funny. Just watch what he says and how often he says it here. Thus the heavens and earth were finished, and all the host of them, just in all of it. Everything was done. And on the seventh day, God finished his work that he had done. He rested on the seventh day from all of his work that he had done, because he finished it. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy. Why? Because on it he rested from all his work that he had done in creation. Everything in a past tense. There's no ongoing creation from here forward. Again, anti-evolutionists. Right? This is not it's been going on and it is still going on. No, he did it in 6 days and he's done. He's not going to create more. This was it. He's done creating. So my answer to the question is a 7-day week. We don't get that from the planet or the stars or the moon. We get that from God declaring this is it. Work 6 and then rest. He just simply creates a pattern. By the way, he doesn't establish the Sabbath here. The Sabbath is an official seventh-day rest for the Jews, but that's not for a couple thousand years, actually. So one thing about this is I'm not Jewish. I'm not keeping the Sabbath, but I do think it's because of Creation Week. I think having a day of rest is good. We should pause, and I struggle with that. Brenda said, there will never be a time when you're not moving 150 miles an hour. And that's probably true, unless I'm in a hospital or something. And maybe being that way will cause me to get there quicker than I want to be, and that's not good. But I really have to work at trying to do this, and that's taking that day of rest. And I'll always find ways to, so
Yes.
anyway.
More fishing.
More fishing, yeah. Less working, more fishing.
More napping on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, I do actually try to take a nap every Sunday for that reason. Go ahead. And this will
It's
be.
highly possible that God created worship
Ah,
at seventh day.
yeah. That's very good. Yep. All right, we made it right at 10:30, so. I thought I probably had 2 weeks worth of stuff prepared, but we got through it all. All right. Let me pray for us and we'll go to the service. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for the morning. Thank you for showing us the truth of how all of this came to be. Thank you for helping us to see that you are a God of order, of complexity, of enormous power. Lord, help us to bring that to mind as we worship you, think of you as the true, creative, awesome God that you are. Now, Lord, I pray that you bring us back in weeks to come to continue to see more of the treasure of truth that you have here for us to unfold. And we pray all these things in Jesus' name.